Welcome to another episode of Four Guys Talking About AI. We got three guys today. We got John back. We got Greg here, and yours truly. Neil is in Mexico City this week. What's up,
Poor
guys?
guy.
What are you doing?
Hey, by the way, this isn't just another episode. It sounds like this is the 50th episode, the semi-centennial, I think maybe we call it.
The big
Yeah.
5-0. I love
Yeah,
it.
it's amazing. It's amazing. We've been doing this for essentially a year. You know, we've been doing it for longer than a year because we haven't done it every week.
It's pretty incredible. You know, John and I had this idea, I don't know, maybe a year and a half ago, a couple of years ago even. And John, you even came up with the name. I think it was two guys talking about AI back then, and we rolled it out as four guys, and here we are, 50 episodes in.
Very flexible naming scheme. That was the nice thing about it. Yeah.
We'll just keep adding and keep going like that. So, well, welcome everybody. This week we're going to be talking about some really interesting stories that happened this week. Disney just made its biggest move yet into the future. They're teaming up with OpenAI in a $1 billion content deal that gives Sora access to over 200 Disney characters. That means that fans now can create AI-generated videos with Mickey, Marvel characters, and pretty much all of the Disney characters, so they can create all kinds of things with Sora. We'll dig into this a little bit. Meanwhile, separate story, we're seeing a strange split in advertising where AI-generated ads are starting to outperform human-made ads, unless people realize that it's created by AI, of course. And when they do, the trust drops fast. We'll dig into why that matters for marketers and for brands going forward. And then we've got a quick story, notes from the field on grief, healing, and an app build from emotion. So let's get into it here and talk about this Disney deal. $1 billion deal where Disney is investing $1 billion into OpenAI.
But they're supposed to be getting $1 billion from OpenAI.
Yeah, somehow there's no cash exchanging hands. So Greg, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, so I just know what's in the coverage. Basically, this couple of days ago, this week, it was announced that there was this partnership, $1 billion partnership, where presumably OpenAI is paying $1 billion to Disney to license more than 200 characters, which includes all the traditional Disney characters, all the movies, Pixar, which Disney owns, Star Wars, which Disney owns, and Marvel, which Disney owns. So there's a lot of intellectual property here, comprising a big chunk of popular culture. And that's all going to be available to Sora. So people will be able to use those characters to create their own videos, kind of a Grateful Dead style marketing gambit.
The tape reception for Disney characters on Sora.
Well, so then Disney's going to make this equity investment in OpenAI. So effectively, this is a barter. This is a kind of a barter arrangement. And Bob Iger said, they sort of spoke to guardrails being part. They're gonna create safety and guardrails around how the characters can be used. So we're not going to see, unnatural acts or offensive behavior or hate speech. In theory, we'll see what happens in practice. And Iger thought that this was a way for them also to accelerate Disney's adoption of AI because they'll get some sort of privileged access to OpenAI technology, presumably. But it's a pretty risky bet for Disney, which is really defined entirely by its IP, its characters, its movies, and its and to let people have at those on the internet is really kind of dicey in my opinion. I don't know if you guys agree.
I don't know about the family value kind of thing that Disney stands for when I imagine what could happen and some of the Sora videos that we've seen,
Right. That first weekend when Sora was available, people took Einstein and Lincoln and Queen Elizabeth and JFK and Martin Luther King and did all kinds of nasty things with them, put words in their mouths, created whole new visual scenarios that were very convincing, very, very convincing,
Yeah.
So
And I think, if you're Sam Altman and you're in the room negotiating this deal, what you point to is those early experiences with Sora where people kind of, were jailbreaking it, really is what they were doing. They were trying to get it to do things it shouldn't do. And all the things that OpenAI learned from that experience. And you'll notice that most of those big problems came when the app first launched, and there've been fewer of them since. And by the way, the other thing you're going to say is, Sam Altman was one of the first, live today humans to allow himself to be put into it. I mean, that was my first exposure to the app. As I went in there, I'm like, Sam Altman's like, he's saying all this. I couldn't actually tell if it was him or his, avatar, because it was so good. So that's a great, bargaining chip to go into a deal with, like this with as well. It's like, look, I put myself in there and all the risk that entails, and it's fine, right? So I think that was brilliantly scripted, sequenced, and staged to have a conversation. And I am still amazed that Disney's the first one that bid on it. That's about as big as it can get in this sort of IP space in the fictional universes. But it makes sense, brilliant staging and sequencing to get it there.
it's a little bit of a last hurrah for Iger, I think, because he's going to be replaced pretty soon with a successor. And this is a very bold move. And so if it pays off, he'll be heralded as a, kind of a genius or a hero. And it's opposite if it results in all kinds of, brand dilution or offensiveness with the characters. I mean, people took, Mickey, the Steamboat Willie Mickey, and did all kinds of nasty things with it. And Winnie the Pooh, Mr. Rogers was a victim of some of this stuff on Sora as well. And Winnie the Pooh is out of copyright or whatever. I mean, it's and people made a horror film with Winnie the Pooh, so.
It's amazing. Well, I heard Iger's actually getting replaced by an AI, so that would be an interesting plot twist.
Yeah, there you go.
But it's pretty fascinating when you think about what you can do with Sora and what might happen to those characters and how important that IP is to Disney and how closely they've guarded it over the years. And now they're just opening it up. And so, John, to your point about, Sam Altman going out there and saying, well, I've been first guy to jump out of the plane and look, I'm not, tarnished myself. Technically, it's pretty fascinating what OpenAI has done to put guardrails on if they have, I don't know what they're going to do with Disney characters, what kind of guardrails they're going to put there. I have to imagine there's going to have to be very strict ones so that, you're not going to have Mr. Rogers, Tupac, and Mickey, doing something nefarious or weird or drug
or saying anything. That's the other thing. It's like saying something political, saying something offensive, and there's just a lot of things to protect against.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get right. I mean, the other at the same time in the early days of Sora, the relaunch, when there was all these terrible videos coming out, there were so many complaints about people saying it won't generate anything. It keeps saying I'm violating, the terms. I'm asking for the most benign stuff. So it's a very hard sort of balance to strike.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's sort of like if you zoom out, what Spotify became to the music industry just by sort of making it almost free. I mean, it's like $10 to $15 a month per account to have access to the full library of music. This is a little bit akin to that, where it's just kind of making it available in this new environment at a very low cost, effectively. See what happens here. So,
yeah.
One sort of rhetorical question here at the end. Is this going to make people more interested to see the Disney movies, to watch them on streaming, to sign up for Disney Plus, to go to the parks? Or is it going to saturate the market in such a way that they don't care as much
and devalue the IP? Those characters are they're cherished characters by a lot of people, which is what drives the repeat visitorship and purchases and all kinds of merchandising that is tied to all of that. So if you have that at risk because of this either saturation or because of some sort of like misuse or mischaracterization of what that Disney character represents to people, they might just be less inclined to buy the merch as a result of that. And that can have a very significant impact financially.
Well, here's two quick data points. One is fan fiction, which I'm sure you guys know about. So that this repurposing of characters has been going on since the internet was born in the form of written word, right? So there's stories about the Star Wars characters and whatever. That seems to only fuel the flames of interest from these obsessed or hyper interested fans in terms of picking up merch and all that kind of stuff. It's the same people writing and reading that stuff as have all the Star Wars merchandise in their room and in their garage and wherever. Second, on a personal note, when my kids were young and kind of obsessed with all these characters from all these different universes, I made up this story called The Greatest Story Ever Told that intermingled all of the characters, the fictional characters that they were so obsessed with, and when they were 5, 6, 7 years old. And it was a series, and it went probably 50 episodes. Would tell them the story a couple times a week, and this reminds me of that. Like I was telling stories about My Little Pony, interacting with Darth Vader and Mickey Mouse and Cinderella. And now we get to actually do that, on video. And it only made them more enthusiastic about getting My Little Pony dolls at Christmas. So there's a little anecdote that says maybe they'll
Love that.
Well, we'll see in 6 months what happens,
Yeah.
Well, what's also interesting about this is that there's this $1 billion investment that Disney just made in OpenAI through this process. So what's interesting about that to me is I was listening to Jason Calacanis made a comment on their podcast the other day where he was talking about how Google and Meta it's basically the ones who have the most to risk with OpenAI's rise here. And OpenAI makes about 75 to 80% of their revenue through the $20 subscriptions. And what he was suggesting is that there's going to be a chokeout that Google and Meta will have by offering their AI platforms for free. And, Gemini and Meta offering it for free, so that why would you pay $20 to create a chokehold on OpenAI? And if that's the case, and if that does play out, that $1 billion investment might just be on the wrong horse, and we'll see what happens. But it's a very interesting dynamic that could play out here. Not Disney specific, but what do you guys think about that? What's your feeling on, how this might play out with OpenAI versus Meta versus Google? Obviously, Meta and Google are not going to just stand idly and just let OpenAI take their.
There's a little bit of an antitrust thing there for Google, sort of subsidizing their AI development with ads and dumping essentially the AI in a certain way. I mean, I think that there's that's a clear semi-anti-competitive behavior there. Meta's maybe in a little bit different position.
By the way, you didn't mention Microsoft in that, which is interesting, right? Although if you look at sort of the reporting on everything that's going on at Microsoft, I mean, their Copilot stuff is doing, abysmally, and they can't even get their people internally to use it, which has been kind of a little bit of egg on their face sort of moment. But one of the things I was going to say is historically, it's been a mistake to count out any of these companies in this sort of big revolutions. Even Microsoft, as an example, missed all of the important big innovations and still came out on top, right? They missed the internet. Internet 1.0, they missed it. They missed mobile, right?
Yeah,
and they went just fine. So I think it's it's anybody's guess who actually emerges from this, and I think it's too premature to count out any of the giants. They're going to figure out a way.
It was a good lead into the AI ad story, right? The story is that AI ads are outperforming human-generated ads, except for when consumers see that the ad is actually AI, in which case trust plummets and the pendulum swings heavily to not being able to trust the brand because it looks fake, feels fake, and who's interested in that. Let's talk a little bit about that, because this is where a lot of the battle is happening. OpenAI is going to be releasing ads in ChatGPT soon, and those ad dollars are at risk for Meta and Google. So that's the big risk for them. Greg, what are your thoughts on that?
It's a really interesting phenomenon that all the big ad platforms are moving to automate more and more of the process, including the creative. Google especially has introduced image creation and other aspects of those ads, and they're on a path that has been going for 15 or more years, where they're trying to make more and more of the ad process as automated as they can. And so I would imagine, the research that says that these AI generated ads are more effective, I buy that. There were some nuances in the research, but the at the broadest level, people don't like the idea of AI ads. That Coke did an AI ad, McDonald's did an AI ad, and they were very negatively responded to. Now, people are still going to drink Coke and go to McDonald's, and those ads don't impact them. But for brands that are less well established, an ad that's created in AI that then is discovered to be AI is quite a risk. And New York's just signed into law. Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, just signed into law a disclosure rule that requires when there's an AI actor in an ad, that has to be disclosed, which will have an adverse impact on the reception of the ad. So it's a tricky thing, there's an ethical issue there. Do you do these ads because they're cheap to create and effective and not disclose it, or do you disclose it, which is the ethically correct thing, because that's what people want, but then it diminishes the effectiveness of the ad?
Yeah, it's going to be so interesting to see how this plays out, because at some level, this feels like the typical grappling with newness that society goes through. Like we don't need to disclose that special effects are being used in movies. Like, we know that person didn't really get blown up, and actually we don't even need to disclose CGI and that kind of thing. So I suspect at some point everybody will just assume that everything is, got AI sprinkled in it or is driven by it, and we'll all be okay with that. In the meantime, there's this very uncomfortable transition that we all go through. I would also say, I think that sort of disgust or recoil, we were talking about this before the show. It's akin to, although slightly different than, the uncanny valley. It is this sort of visceral reaction to, oh wait, this isn't human. That is a real response that we're going to need to contend with. And in particular, we do not like to be cheated. We have a lot of our culture is around, if you look at evolutionary biology and psychology, is around cheating and detecting cheating. Like that's what we're all about, is figuring out how to get it over on the other person and not have it gotten over on me. And by the way, one last thing I'll say, this reminds me a little bit of the quote attributed, I think, to Gandhi, which is, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win, right? Like, that's the quote. Like, AI was sort of like, it's not really going to be a big deal. And then, now we've got some people laughing at it. Look how ridiculous this looks. And there's 3 arms and 6 fingers. And you got now they're fighting you. This is the governor saying, you have to disclose it. We're going to put regulations on this. And, pretty soon AI wins.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting with the state laws also. Trump just signed an executive order yesterday, basically neutering state AI laws,
which, it should be pointed out, has no legal impact whatsoever. His executive order cannot do anything legally to these state laws. What he's calling for is Congress to preempt with its own legislation. He's encouraging Congress, and he's saying, we're going to punish the states with fund restrictions and other mechanisms, but the executive order has no force of law in terms of the state regulation.
I was thinking that when I saw that headline yesterday.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I feel like we're in this moment with the AI detection component of this. Things have evolved just in the past year so much, where you can't really tell a lot of, is it AI or is it real? It looks so real now, and that's just been in the past year. So I feel like this AI ads, is it really AI or is it real? I think this me, it feels like just a short window that will, a year from now, we'll be looking like, all right, it's all, we just can't tell. And even still, I look at things sometimes and I'm like, is that AI? I have to look at the comments and just like, exactly, is this really, is that real or is that AI? It's hard to tell sometimes.
There's a philosophical discussion that we can have at another time about, is this deception or is it just discomfort with a new technology?
Yeah.
Consumer laws are designed to protect people against deception, manipulation. Does this fall into that category? Is it just people who are uncomfortable with change and new technology, and the government, state government responding that way?
It's really a good concept because, John, to your point, what about CGI? What, that guy didn't get blown up, like you said. So is that deception or is that just storytelling? And so that's a really hard line to walk.
It's a context, right? It's a context. I mean, I think we know movies, unless it's a documentary or purports to be factual, that we know movies are stories, that they're made up, that they're fictional. It's a visual storytelling medium. With
Yeah.
ads, it's a little bit of a gray area because ads are a simulation of real life very often. Hey, I'm going shopping at, Walmart or whatever. That's not a real mom or dad or family. They're actors. And we sort of intellectually know that, but there's this sort of, verisimilitude of real life. And so are ads storytelling? Are ads some representation of the real world? Do we need to be protected? I mean, it's a very interesting sort of philosophical, ethical thing.
And the difference is also the difference between storytelling in a movie and in an ad is that you're essentially in an ad, you're suspending the belief for somebody so that they'll spend money on that. And if that really is deception at that point, that's that's a terrible thing for the consumer because they just got robbed from their money. That's a different outcome than just watching a movie and saying, did that building really blow up or not?
Well, and then you've got this other phenomenon of influencers on YouTube, for example. I don't want to sort of belabor this and open another doorway, which is another form of advertising. Somebody representing a brand or promoting something, but they are a real person and they have this product that they're selling, and the disclosures there are often very difficult to recognize. But what if we're going to start having AI influencers? I mean, it's like the lines between reality and its opposite start to get very blurry in some of these situations.
I guess one other position you could take on all of it is that like this idea of, suspension of disbelief and, fooling us into whatever it is, but, experiencing the story and being immersed in the world or buying the product, like that's been going on, forever. And, maybe this is just the next version of that. And there's a level of cynicism that I think we're going to have to need to deal with there, which is, okay, if nothing's real, how do you trust anything? Which may actually be the bigger problem in the end. It might not be.
Yes.
We've got like Arnold Schwarzenegger, hawking a product that he didn't really hawk. That might not be as big a deal as the actual president of the United States saying something and everybody dismissing it as being untrue.
Well, I've been hearing this concept of a trust recession. That's a common phrase these days, and I think there's a good cause for that. But that's effectively what this turns into, if that's the case.
Have you guys seen The Mountainhead? Has that been discussed on any recent episodes?
No, I watched part of it. I couldn't get through the whole thing. It was just too much bro energy going on there.
At that level, it's a rough one. Like they've captured the tech bro thing so effectively that it's like you feel gross afterwards. But like thematically, as it pertains to this stuff, man, it's like it's spot on.
So let's start. So, John, you coined this term that I hadn't heard before, but grief coding.
Sure.
Notes from the field here. Talk a little bit about what that was all about.
Yeah, I mean, it was somewhat tongue in cheek and somewhat not. So my dad passed away, as you guys know, a few months ago, and I ended up immersing myself in some technology as a way to sort of ameliorate a little bit the grief. I had a lot of good time to kind of grieve and do that, and then I ended up building a little bit of a passion project, kind of heads down, and so I sort of started calling that grief coding. The interesting thing, more than that, it was a nice and I think mostly healthy distraction from grief at the right times, was that, so for me, as somebody who developed some stuff, software many years ago, talking like 20 plus years ago, and have not caught up at all on modern stacks, I was able in about 30 days to build something out that actually has been launched and deployed, and is being actively used, and more a comment on where vibe coding and the AI coding tools have sort of made it to at this point than on my capabilities. That somebody like me with my background could do this and deploy it successfully is really wild. And by the way, just part of my experience with this was we've talked about Lovable as a tool. I was literally live coding Lovable in the car with voice while I was doing a drive from Southern California up to Northern California, and built about a quarter of the critical functionality for the app while my Tesla was self-driving and Lovable was building the
You're
code.
truly a man of the future.
That's
Really
what we got the information highway right there.
my way, like whatever. But it really was. It was kind of a magical moment. Like it was. And I will also say, like, the ways in which I felt like I was interacting with a co-development partner while I was doing this, it was pretty insane. Like, something that could iterate on the underlying code as quickly as I could think about it. And it's actually a pretty good app that we may sort of further commercialize. So anyway, as predicted, I think when we started this whole thing up a year ago, the tools continue to evolve at such a rapid clip. Maybe for next time, one of the things that I think is very interesting about this is the idea of bespoke apps. So it is now absolutely possible for businesses to stop buying off the shelf and to build apps that run their companies that have an audience of one company, like something that is completely specific to the company that builds it. And I'm now more convinced than ever that that's something that a lot of companies are going to be experimenting with and exploring in the coming months and years.
I think so. We've been actually doing that for our clients, and that's I can confirm that it's every business has their own way of operating, their own germane processes, and even though you have an off-the-shelf piece of software that is one to many, everybody has their own way of doing it, and it doesn't actually create the efficiencies oftentimes that it needs to, because people have to now learn new things. Whereas if you create a piece of software or a workflow that mirrors exactly how they do something now, and bring that to market for that business, and do it quickly, that's it becomes exactly what the outcome that you just mentioned. And I see that trend.
That's a fairly radical thing that you guys are proposing, and really interesting, worth revisiting in a more thoughtful way, in a more thorough way, rather, in the future, because I think there's something really interesting there.
Yeah, and people talk about SaaS is dead, and these kinds of grandiose comments, but when you kind of look at it in practice like that, it's not to say that this is going to necessarily replace platform, kind of SaaS platforms, but when you look at workflows and how people actually do things and the manual processes that go into executing on basic, mundane, everyday things, helping teams buy back their time not to reduce staff or anything like that, but just make better use of employees' time because you've now taken a lot of these replicable manual processes out of the loop. That can become a significant game changer for companies and lower their overall unit cost of delivering whatever it is that they do.
Well, you've got all these companies that subscribe to many different SaaS tools, many
Yeah.
of which are not used or partially used. You've got all the challenges of learning the software and onboarding and all of that stuff. And in the world of sort of these templated digital newsletter publishing tools that exist, like Beehive and Ghost and some of the others, even WordPress, there are templates. So some middle ground between what you're describing and what you're talking about, Andy, is some sort of template approach that's tailored to the function or the industry that then can be customized for that business.
Yeah.
Like here's the sort of CRM tool for HVAC contractors, and we're going to come in and tweak it for your particular workflow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that the best framing for all this that I really like is like, why do I have to adjust my workflows and ways of doing business to accommodate the limitations of your software? Like that's the world we're in right now. Like everybody is trying to shoehorn what they're doing into the way Salesforce works and its limitations, and Salesforce can't fix that by building more. Like there's too many, permutations of workflows and needs and whatever. So if you flip that whole thing upside down and say, well, what if the software was actually adjusted to fit my very specific workflows and behaviors and the personality of my team and my, like that all of a sudden is really interesting.
Especially there's zero salespeople that want to go into a CRM and start entering data, right? So, but salespeople talk. So it'd be really convenient to have a voice AI that you could talk to your phone and say, hey, send text to John, send text to John Gerard and Greg Sterling and let them know X, Y, and Z, and have the system do that and have it even say back to you, would you like me to create a sequence to follow up with them if they don't reply? Yeah, let's do that. And it just does it automatically.
I think there is a voice input through the Einstein whatever on Salesforce, but we're not that far away from what you're describing, Andy. I mean, it's all technically possible today.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this is a great conversation, guys. Thank you. We will pick it up next week. And thanks everybody for listening. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.